Our discussion, what do you mean? Okay, yeah, okay. Our discussion for this afternoon is learning from a crisis, university leaders' response towards COVID-19. And we have about 40 minutes to discuss this topic. We are quite privileged tonight to have eminent academicians and leaders in their own rights put together and hosted by Brew Forum. We are all aware the coronavirus has devastated the world in a very phenomenal manner since December 2019. And so recently, Brew Forum carried out a study on the preparedness of African universities to respond to COVID-19 and other disasters. This was meant to determine the level of preparedness of our institutions in facing this global pandemic and how to move forward as a continent while preserving the quality of higher education. And so the purpose of this webinar is to provide an opportunity for us all to galvanize collective responses of university leaders. It brings together university managers, vice chancellors, deputy vice chancellors, principals, and deans and other heads of tertiary education from within and outside Africa, bringing lessons from the global perspective, but also regional perspective. And we are honored tonight by 4 presenters, but before I invite the 4 presenters, I am requesting that when you are not speaking, you should kindly mute your phone. Kindly mute your phone unless you are talking. And also, you can collapse the video so that we are able to speak to the person at stage. We shall have opportunities for question and answers. But before we proceed, allow me, colleagues, to invite Professor Dipala to give his welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our moderator, Professor Christine Dransoa, the Vice Chancellor of Moni University in North Uganda. Thank you, our distinguished panelists, and thank you, participants. I welcome you on behalf of the Reform Network Universities to this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic is unleashing a public health crisis with widespread consequences across all sectors, especially for the economically vulnerable people, not only in Africa, but globally. The pandemic has dramatically changed the global landscape, affecting all facets of life, including politics and global alliances, socioeconomics, livelihoods, and operations of many institutions including governments and universities. It has especially significantly affected education, as almost all institutions of learning have been forced to close, and most students cannot as such have access to education, given that most of them rely on face-to-face learning within the campuses offering education. This is a crisis facing the higher education sector in Africa, and indeed the broad education value chain in the continent, and I believe in several other places in this world. Ladies and gentlemen, many institutions and governments are responding not only to deal with the current crisis, but also post-COVID-19. This requires us to learn from what has happened, make adjustments, and reposition for the future, which invariably will include other crises. Moreover, we need to take advantage of this crisis to reposition the role of universities in preparing for the future. One university says, we build for the future. Accordingly, Reform as a network of 126 universities operating in 38 African countries is convening a series of 10 webinars to foster cross-learning and dialogue to explore both the current and post-COVID-19 landscape, with the aim of galvanizing Africa-wide and international collaboration for needed interventions, including improvement in the livelihoods of our people and the environment. Today's webinar is the first in the series of the 10 webinars Forum will be hosting. This first dialogue is to help us learn from the 3 universities in Africa and one from Europe on how the pandemic has affected their institutions and how their institutions are responding and repositioning themselves. I thank the leadership of these 4 universities for accepting to share their perspective. This seminar will be followed by 2 others on education, including one with African policymakers focused on the wider education value chain. Subsequently, we shall have 7 follow-up webinars focused on medical health, agriculture, environment, livelihoods, and finally, the last one on online learning and teaching. All the webinars will be streamed in our social media platforms and are being recorded for future viewing. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for accepting our invitation to participate in this webinar, and hopefully you will join us in the follow-up webinars. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Professor Dipala. That is the introductory remark from the Executive Secretary. I would like to pause briefly and announce that those who would like translation should go to the extreme end of the icons, and they would find where they can shift and change to the language that is understandable to them. We are running this webinar in 2 languages, French and English. Thank you very much. We are now, excuse me. We are moving now to the next part of our presentation. And Yeah. Allow me to, oh, Jesus. I am trying to look for the slides, but without wasting a lot of time, allow me to introduce quickly our presenter. It's not this one. No, it's not. Oh my God. Next. It should have been a Professor, the upper one. Is this one? Sorry about that hiccup, but allow me to introduce Professor Dr. Arthur Moll. Please, take it back. Professor Moll is a professor of environmental health in Wageningen University, and he has served at various universities in China, in Japan, and Malaysia. Professor brings very extensive experience in the leadership of higher education, but also in the corporate world. Professor has extensively published in the areas of environment and agro-food governance. He's on the editorial board of very many journals, and as well as editor of very many book series. Professor Moll is the Rector Magnificus and Vice President of Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands. Join me now in welcoming Professor to give his presentation in the area of internationalization. Professor Moll, we want to benefit from your experience, and therefore, can you share your viewpoints on how universities in the Netherlands have repositioned themselves in the light of the COVID pandemic? And how should we reposition our very rich partnership, the European African partnerships, in the light of this pandemic? And you may talk to the issues of international students in a crisis moment. We want to hear from you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And congratulations to Reform for organizing this webinar. Very timely on a hot topic. And I really appreciated that I was invited here and could talk to you. So what I would do is like to go over a little bit on how in the Netherlands, and particularly also my university and research institutes, have reacted to the COVID-19 crisis, and how we are still wrestling with it internally, but also in a more international perspective. As many of the other universities, this was taken us by quite a surprise. It is an unprecedented disruption of our university, especially in its teaching on campus, but also in its research activities. Basically, within 8 hours, we were announced by the government to close down all our activities on campus. A little bit later, we were allowed to reinstall some of our research activities, but all the face-to-face education is still very much closed on our campus. And we have some 15,000 students on our campus at the moment. I want to touch upon 4 issues. So let's explain you a little bit how we reacted to that, say a little bit on how we are now building up scenarios for the future, say a little bit on the financial state, and then on international collaboration. So those 4 points I want to cover in say 7-8 minutes. So basically, when we were confronted with that COVID-19 crisis and the quite dramatic measures our government took and had to take also, we basically said in less than 2 days, we completely shifted our mode of education from a face-to-face mode of education to online education. So within a weekend, we shifted basically all our courses, about 95% of our courses, to an online modus. And we could do that because we had already quite some experience with online teaching. So that means also that we are still in contact with all our students. We are lecturing them every day, also giving them assignments, also doing some versions of practicals online. And the same we have done also with our exams. So we have moved completely to an online form of examination. We call them proctored remote exams, where we use, well, basically the internet to do exams for all the students. So that means also that, and I think that we manage quite well, is that the study delay of our students is quite limited up till now. So especially some of the practicals are extremely difficult to follow up online in an online modus, because you cannot practice lab work behind your computer. But many of the other courses as well, many of the thesis work what our students are doing is still continuing. And that means that most of our students are still involved in our university, be it in a very different mode than they used to be. The same we have done also with student support. We also moved that completely to online. So student psychologists, study advisors, student deans, etc., are all interacting with our students via an online modus. And of course, that is also possible because most of our students have easy access to the internet and have a good computer system and a huge coverage throughout the Netherlands, but also internationally. We have also directly sent out a call for crowdfunding to support our students among our alumni. We have more than 50,000 alumni all over the world, and we got a massive response for that. So we set up an emergency fund for students who fell short of finances or came in all kind of other troubles. For instance, we had to get back many of our students which were abroad doing their research or education back to the Netherlands, or sent students, international students who were in Wageningen, who would like to go back to their country to help them to get back to their home country. And we use that emergency fund also for that. So that's basically was our reaction. In terms of research, we do, I think, some 50% we could continue with our lab research. So most of our PhD students could continue lab-based research, and also all the desk research, of course, could continue, but then basically from home. So at the moment we are, and that's my second point, we have developed and we are now further developing and executing 2 types of scenarios. So we have developed what we call an exit scenario. So that means in the scenario on how we can get out of this COVID-19 crisis. So that means, and you see that now happening in our country and throughout Europe, that some of the dramatic measures are being slowly relaxed. So we have set up a kind of scenario on how we can slowly get back into a normal teaching mode on campus. For the rest of the year, that will be at most 25% of the teaching which can really be done on campus, and about, I think, 75% of the research we can do on campus. But of course, it's essential what kind of teaching and what kind of research you can do on campus and how you will to do that. So we are now outrolling our exit scenarios to do that, where we cope with different kind of interests of students and staff from different kind of departments. We look into all kinds of mobility schemes because public transport is one of the critical issues in Europe and the Netherlands, because we cannot have too many people at the same time in buses or in other forms of public transport. So we have to take all kinds of decisions and set priorities on who comes first and who comes second, so to say. The second scenario we are now developing is what we call the long-term effect scenario. So we are trying to look into what are the consequences of this COVID-19 crisis in different modes. So an easy mode, a more severe mode, and a really dramatic mode of going through this COVID-19 crisis. But at the same time, in those scenarios, we are also looking at the chances and opportunity for us. So what is now changing? For instance, we changed completely to an online mode of education. Do we want to keep certain elements of online teaching more strongly also after the COVID-19 crisis? We are also moved completely to online forms of meetings, which saves a lot of traveling. Do we want to keep some of these meetings? We also see certain kind of advantage in new research lines, especially on all kind of immunity problems, all kind of issues related to food and the virus, the coronavirus, and people who are with diabetes, which are much more suffering from that virus than other ones. So we see also a lot of new research lines being opened there. The third point I want to cover a little bit with you is the finances in a broader sense. So basically what we have seen in terms of financial consequences for our university is, for one, the international students. So many of the international students have gone home to their home country when the crisis started to emerge. And we see also a decrease of new incoming international students for the coming academic years. And that also relates to, amongst other, finances in our institution. Same is true for all kinds of projects we get from companies or from government officials. So they are already preparing for an economic recession, and we see also the amount of research and research activities which are funded by third parties are reducing. So we are also preparing for that and see how we can work with that. So that means also that some of the research lines have to stop. Some of the research has to switch to other modes. What we are also doing in terms of finances is set up and trying to convince our government and also the EU government is that the best way to get out of an economic recession following the COVID-19 crisis is to innovate more strongly. So we have set up a strong lobby campaign towards our government, is that innovation is indeed the way to get out quickly out of an economic recession following the COVID-19 crisis. And we get some good responses for that. And lastly, related also to finances, we are using some of our savings. So we are investing additionally in some fields where we think it's necessary. And one of these fields is also in setting up a fellowship for international students, because we see them falling away. And we want to maintain a very strong international university with an international set of students and what we call an international classroom. The last point I take 1 or 2 minutes for that is that we indeed also look very much to international collaboration. And we think some people say that this is the end of globalization and international collaboration. We really think it just shows how important it is to enhance and even further develop international collaboration, also among universities and also with Africa. So we are strongly also looking in how we should then develop this new form of international collaboration under COVID-19 conditions and also after COVID-19 conditions. It's really necessary to strengthen our international collaboration to fight these kind of crises, but also to become much more aware and interested and to understand the different set of conditions which different kind of universities and countries are being faced with under COVID-19. Thank you very much for your attention. for the moment.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Professor Moll. And thank you for giving us the reassurance that international partnerships will roll on despite the enormous challenges. And we will give a short time afterwards when other presenters have concluded for you to respond to a few questions that are coming in. We are aware that you have another assignment. Thank you. Allow me now to invite the next presenter. Our next presenter is Professor Mr. El Habiti. He serves as the General Secretary of Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, and he's also the executive Vice President for Science and Technology. Mr. El Habib brings on board a combination of both corporate as well as educational management and administrative skills and leadership capabilities. He joined OCP in January 2013, where he was serving in positions of various importance, such as Deputy General Secretary. Prior to that, he undertook several strategic and managerial positions, including piloting strategic and operational projects in Morocco and France. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Labit is going to speak broadly on what are the lessons learned from the pandemic and its effect on higher education sector. And indeed, the education value chain, especially that one in Morocco, so that we pick lessons from him. He will also speak to what realignment University of Mohammed VI Polytechnic has undertaken and what they envision in the way forward. Can you, Mr. Labit, share your perspective specifically on the issue of responding to university immediate needs, including staff realignment? Thank you, sir. You are most welcome.
Thank you, Professor. I think I could switch to French, yeah? Because it's both French and English.
Sure.
Yeah, très bien. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour, chers collègues. Je partage avec vous ce que l'Université Mohammed VI Polytechnique a entrepris comme démarche, comme action pour répondre à la crise du Covid-19. Comme décrit par professeur Moll, nous avons reçu l'orientation et les consignes du ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur de fermer le campus 48 heures sous 48 heures. Donc c'était le vendredi et nous avons dû fermer le campus le lundi. Donc la première action que nous avons faite, entreprise, c'est le rapatriement des étudiants marocains et leur accompagnement pour rentrer chez eux. Nous avons aussi géré les étudiants internationaux qui n'ont pas pu regagner leur pays. En fait, il y en avait une centaine, une quarantaine ont pu rentrer chez eux, mais le reste, il y a une soixantaine d'étudiants qui sont restés sur le campus. Jusqu'à date d'aujourd'hui, il y a une seule personne qui a pu rentrer sur les frontières ont été fermées. Il y a une personne qui a pu quitter le territoire il y a 2 jours. Donc, ce que nous avons fait, c'est comme Wageningen, en fait, nous avons basculé vers un enseignement à distance. Pour ce faire, il fallait s'assurer que tous les étudiants avaient la possibilité de se connecter. C'est important, en fait, d'assurer, d'être sûr d'une forme d'équité au niveau des étudiants. Donc là, il y a un effort qui a été fait par l'université de fournir des kits et des kits de connexion auprès des étudiants qui n'avaient pas ces moyens. Nous sommes allés même jusqu'à équiper des étudiants par des ordinateurs parce qu'il y en avait quelques-uns qui n'en avaient pas et qui utilisaient beaucoup plus que ça. Donc, nous avons mis à la disposition de nos professeurs différentes plateformes que nous avons.
Please, those who do not understand French, go to the icon and select the language that you can understand, English or French, rather.
Okay, otherwise I can switch to English if there are some concerns about that. Ok, je pense que les gens vont se connecter effectivement sur le channel en anglais. Bref. Donc, nous avons mis à la disposition de nos enseignants-chercheurs les différentes plateformes que nous avons mises en place pour qu'ils puissent assurer la continuité pédagogique auprès des étudiants. Nous avons appris sur le tas, comme on dit, comment adapter l'enseignement parce que il y a vraiment beaucoup de différences. Là, je dis des choses que vous savez sur la différence entre un enseignement présentiel et un enseignement en distanciel. Et donc, les professeurs eux-mêmes ont dû s'adapter. Il y a eu des check-in des fois quotidiens avec les étudiants. S'assurer comme quoi les étudiants avaient un mentor, donc un professeur avait 3, 4, 5 étudiants qui devaient rester en contact avec tous les jours. Voilà. Après, en fait, la mission de l'UMCC, au-delà de ça, c'est d'être une plateforme aussi pour les autres universités marocaines. Donc, nous avons mis à la disposition du ministère de l'Éducation nationale notre plateforme avec des cours qui ont été digitalisés, principalement pour le programme des classes préparatoires qui est utilisé pour l'intégration des écoles d'ingénieurs. Et nous avons développé avec notre partenaire EPSL une plateforme de MOOC où nous avons mis à la disposition des universités au Maroc et en Afrique l'ensemble des cours développés par le PSL. Il s'agit d'une quarantaine. Donc, par rapport à ça, nous avons entamé, grâce au partenariat avec le Forum, qu'on tient vraiment à remercier, de partager ce savoir-faire avec l'ensemble des universités en Afrique. Je pense qu'il y a un premier, il y avait déjà l'organisation de 2 webinaires pour expliquer le contenu des plateformes et à partir de demain, des sessions de formation avec les chancellors, les vice chancellors, les deans, les vice deans, les quelques professeurs sur comment utiliser ce contenu pédagogique qui a été mis à la disposition des universités africaines par le PFL et par d'autres acteurs qui arrivent. Donc, nous sommes en train d'enrichir cette plateforme qui va devenir une plateforme panafricaine qui permet à l'ensemble des étudiants en Afrique d'avoir accès à un contenu pédagogique de haute qualité. Donc, ça, c'est concernant l'éducation. Concernant la recherche, pareil, comme l'Université de Wageningen, nous avons dû adapter notre façon de faire pour respecter les mesures de la distanciation sociale. Donc, le nombre de chercheurs par laboratoire a diminué. Il y a des étudiants qui ont continué à faire des expérimentations au niveau des laboratoires, mais en respectant les mesures sanitaires. Nous avons profité de cette période pour inviter l'ensemble des chercheurs à finaliser leurs publications, leurs articles. Et donc, on a vu un nombre d'articles assez intéressants qui sont sortis pendant cette période. En plus, nous avons participé dans un élan de solidarité, ça ce sont les chercheurs eux-mêmes, sans avoir demandé l'autorisation de qui que ce soit, dans des efforts qui ont été fournis par l'écosystème de recherche au Maroc pour aider les différentes administrations de faire face au Covid. Donc, je prends pour exemple le premier ventilateur fabriqué au Maroc, 100% marocain. C'était le fruit d'une collaboration spontanée entre plusieurs chercheurs, des différents chercheurs des différentes universités au Maroc, et l'UMCC a joué un rôle donc maintenant, aller de l'avant. Le déconfinement au Maroc commence à partir du 10 juin, c'est-à-dire en fait la fin du confinement c'est aujourd'hui, donc à partir de demain il y a la période du déconfinement qui commence. Nous sommes obligés de veiller à la santé des étudiants, des collaborateurs. Donc, nous avons pris plusieurs mesures pour nous assurer que les conditions sont là pour une reprise dans les règles de l'art. Nous avons fait ce qu'on appelle un plan de reprise d'activité. Nous sommes rentrés dans le détail pour être sûr que tout est au rendez-vous. Et j'espère que c'est le cas. En fait, à partir de demain, nous avons commencé le déploiement. Et une des choses qu'on va garder, c'est le télétravail, parce que nous avons vu, grâce à la situation actuelle, que le télétravail est une façon, parmi d'autres, pour répondre aux objectifs. Nous ne sommes pas tous obligés d'être là tout le temps. Et là, nous l'avons vécu, testé pendant les 3 mois du confinement. Donc, la dernière partie, il ne me reste pas beaucoup de temps, donc par rapport à l'année prochaine, nous allons reprendre les étudiants pour retourner sur le campus à partir du mois de septembre. Et là, en fait, nous avons déjà travaillé sur le setup des salles de cours, le setup même de la cafétéria, de la cantine, pour pouvoir accueillir les étudiants dans les meilleures conditions. Et notre ambition, c'est de profiter de cette accélération au niveau du digital pour partager tout ce que nous avons fait avec l'ensemble des partenaires en Afrique. Donc, il y a des plateformes qui ont été développées, il y a par exemple des ventilateurs ou des choses qui ont été fabriquées, et notre souhait, c'est de les partager avec l'ensemble des universités en Afrique. Rappelons que la vocation de l'Université Mohammed-VI Polytechnique est de répondre aux défis du continent africain, et le COVID-19 en est un. Voilà, merci beaucoup de votre attention. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very, very much, Professor. We are very grateful for the webinar mentorship and training, which is ongoing and online, which is available to all institutions in this forum. We thank you so much for that. Our next presentation is going to be handled by Professor Francis Paterson. We are sharing that screen, so just be a little patient. Professor William Paterson was Deputy Vice Chancellor of University of Cape Town. He served as Dean Engineering and Built Environment in Cape Town University. He also was Executive Head, Strategist at the Anglo-American Platinum Center, Executive Vice President, Research and Development at Mintech, Head of Department of Chemical Engineering at the Technicon, now the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. He is a non-executive director on boards of Fruits Unlimited, Vegan Africa, and Stone3 Digital, and several other companies. So you can imagine Professor brings various experiences, both in academic and industry. And allow me also to recognize Professor Barnabas. He has just joined us. Welcome, Professor Barnabas. Professor Francis Paterson, can you share your insights on how South African universities, especially University of Free State, are responding to the pandemic and realigning their activities? From your perspectives, how will the pandemic change higher education service delivery? And in a broader sense, how will this affect the education system in Africa? And also, what can you advise on the issue of university finances for operations and innovations in this changing landscape? Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to, and also thank you for that kind introduction. I just want to put my video on that you also could be able to see me. It's struggling there. Don't know why. Okay, all right, he's there. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to talk about three issues really, as you have indicated. The first one I want to talk is about universities in South Africa and how we have coordinated ourselves around the pandemic. And then I want to focus a little bit more in respect to the University of the Free State. And finally, I'll end off, talk a little bit about finances and how one have managed finances, specifically the University of the Free State, in relation to this pandemic. And at the end, I'll offer some advice, in fact, and also some suggestions in terms of how we could move as universities post COVID-19. So in South Africa, we have 26 public universities. It's been coordinated under an umbrella body called University South Africa. And I must say that as a University South Africa, and I'm serving on the executive committee of that University South Africa, we'll be able to work together as a system. Obviously, there are always going to be differentiations amongst these institutions, but the fact that we could argue specific systemic issues with our National Department of Higher Education and Training on various things, whether it's devices, whether it's needing support to negotiate with the telecommunications companies to generate some data, or various other things. So within that umbrella body, all the sort of challenges that universities might experience are brought onto the table, and we as a collective try to say, well, how can we resolve that? And that for me is a plus point what I experienced within South Africa and within the national system of higher education. Moving closer to the University of the Free State. So when we identified the first COVID-19 case in South Africa, that was around about early March, the university decided three things. We decided that we're going to have a much more integrated approach towards tackling this pandemic. And we formed and established what we called a special executive group that is chaired by the Vice Chancellor and chaired by myself. And that group consists of people with skills that can make decisions, that have project management skills, that have scenario planning skills. We have scientists on that committee with epidemiology skills or virology skills. And then we also brought together people with skills of the institution itself, the institutional culture, as well as communication. So that was the first thing that we do. And we said that we need to pull that together very quickly so that we look at the pandemic in an integrated manner. The second point is that we said that we need to, in a crisis, you can't wait until you get all the results, until you get all the information. You have to make decisions as you go along. And sometimes some of those decisions might not be correct, and then you go back and you correct it. But you can't wait until you got all the informations that is available, because by that time the crisis might have consumed you already. So we decided that if we're gonna go along that approach, there need to be guiding principles that will guide the special executive group. And there was about 3 or 4. The first one that we focused on was to say the first priority is the safety, health, and well-being of our staff and students. That's always going to be number one. The second priority will talk about the fact that any decision, any action that we would make, we should do in a socially just manner. The third one is that we should always focus on the fact that we should not leave students behind. All the students that we've got in our face-to-face engagement, we need to ensure that they have got the maximum support and have got everything available as far as possible to be able to complete the academic year. And the fourth thing is that coupled to the fact that the crisis, you can't have all the data and information at the same time, we will have a multiple approach of ensuring that the students complete, or every student have the opportunity to complete their academic year. So that's the second thing that we did. And the third one is in the special executive group, we have communication as a coordinated function. Because in the crisis, your communication needs to be clear, it needs to be rapid, it needs to be precise, and it needs to be on time. And if you don't do that, you can create anxiety among staff and students. And that is how we in the University of Free State have managed that. Now, we had 7 task teams that were multidisciplinary of nature, one focusing on teaching and learning. There was one that focusing on staff, one focused on staff and student integration, one focused on finance and legal, one focused on science, because the decision making that we do have been and will always be informed by science and evidence. And then we also have a task team that focus on the future. How would the future university business model look like? And in a sense, the special executive group is also the repository of information, because everything is collated there, everything is discussed, and then it's been implemented. And I must say, up until now, we would be able to effectively navigate it ourselves as an institution through this pandemic. Obviously, with the crisis, there are always going to be challenges, but we then have got ways in dealing with those sort of crises that might come up. The teaching and learning one, moving from face to face to what we call remote teaching and learning, is not actually online the way that we would define online, because if you want to really do online teaching and learning, you probably would need to have a preparation period of about 8 to 9 months to prepare a potential module. So it's really remote teaching and learning. But the challenges that the previous speakers also talked about, digital equality, and our approach was rather to focus on digital equity, because digital equality is a massive social challenge in South Africa, and I would also say on the continent, and we need more than the universities to be able to resolve that. But we manage that in a particular way. So, Madam Chair, to move to the university finances, any university would have an annual budget. And so therefore, in 2020, there would be an annual budget for a university. When a crisis such as the COVID pandemic hits a university, then that budget is going to be impacted, because you're going to have additional expenditure to be able to adapt to your new way of doing things. And that necessarily hasn't been incorporated in your 2020 budget. So we needed to make sure that we have an adjusted 2020 budget to be able to accommodate for those additional expenditure. But it's also important for university finance that the income as being dictated in your 2020 budget might also be at risk. And therefore, those were the two things that we as university needed to take into account to be able to say, well, on the one hand, we need to have cash management because we need to have cash at hand. And on the other hand, we also then therefore need to prioritize the budget to be able to provide that cash. And therefore, one would look at would you reprioritize items in your 2020 budget? Would you defer items in your 2020 budget? Or would you actually reallocate certain items? And then are there specific ways in which you could infuse certain savings in your university budget? So the adjusted 2020 budget was for us quite crucial. And it was crucial from another perspective, because in the pandemic, and as you impacted finances, staff might also become anxious because is my job going to be secure? And it was important to communicate immediately after the adjustment was approved through the governance systems of the universities, to communicate that to the staff and to the students, to say, this is what we're going to do, all the jobs are secured, this is the savings, and this is the level of fiscal discipline that we're going to apply in the 2020 budget. But it was also important, Madam Chair, to look at what will happen beyond 2020, because I believe that the real impacts is really going to happen in the 2021 and 2022 budgets. So therefore, you need to do medium to long-term scenario planning. And that is what our university, and I presume a lot of other universities, is doing currently. But to be able to do that, we talked about financial sustainability. One has to understand what is the business, what is the financial model of the university, how does it actually work? And there's really three drivers of that financial model. The one driver is your tuition fees that you would get from your students. The second driver would be the subsidy or the state contribution. And the third driver is what people often call within the higher education sector as a third stream income. That's income that could come from cost recovery based on your contract research, or is income from investment that you might have on your endowments, or it's income that you would get from donations. And that's the three drivers. So if we for one moment just pause there, then I think it's important to realize that all of those three drivers are at risk. Because in South Africa, if you just look at the South African economy, our economy was already a little bit in trouble before the COVID-19. So when COVID-19 happened, one can just imagine that there is going to be more pressure on the economy. And it is envisaged that we probably would lose in the order of about 7 million jobs within the South African economy. But to pay student fees. So student fees in itself might be a challenge. The government fiscus is going to be under pressure, and to what extent do we able to understand that fully, that there might be a potential cut in future contribution from the state. And as some of the previous speakers have indicated, Madam Chair, that the relationship or the way in which private sector industry and commerce is looking at sponsoring bursaries, sponsoring research, contributing towards research, contributing to donations is also going to change, because they're feeling the same pressure. So it's important that we need to understand how we're going to manage through the longer term scenario planning. And finally, Chair, and I know that I've got 1 minute to 2 minutes left, is that the fact that universities' massive, or the largest expense in the university budget are the salary of the staff. On average, if you take a university, then you probably would work about between 60 and 65% of your operational budget would be, or your budget would be allocated to salaries. Some universities actually have got more than that. So it's important that leadership in universities need to think about how innovatively are we going to and optimally manage the utilization of human resources within universities. We also, secondly, Chair, will have to look at how we're going to co-create new relationships with private sector industry, commerce, with philanthropic organizations. It's important, because if we don't co-create those new relationships, those relationships are going to be dictated to us, because those organizations which already have done their thinking, their strategic engagements, and already have proposed what their models is going to look like. So it's important for us to look at the co-creation. And I think there is massive opportunities in that space. The opportunity of how do we use the aspect of solidarity, social solidarity, to be able to co-create relationships that we can benefit from universities. And my final comment is the fact that universities will also have to make clear to all stakeholders what is their purpose. So what is our societal benefit? What is it what we as university provide to the benefit of society? That is what we need to also have to make clear post-COVID. Otherwise, we're going to lose that co-creative engagement and that future relationships that is so crucial. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Paterson. Indeed, we must remain very relevant to our communities and be able to re-engineer our relationships. Now, because we are running short of time, allow me to move straight to invite Professor Barnabas Nawangwe. Professor Nawangwe is the Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, which is a premier university in Africa. He served in several positions, and he had a lot of input in the reformation of Makerere University's transformation from faculty-based to collegiate system. And Professor Nawangwe is the one hosting RUFORUM on the campus of Makerere University. We are very, very grateful, Professor. And the discussion point for Professor Nawangwe is on how Makerere has responded to the COVID-19 and how supportive has the university been to government efforts, and also how we are, as a university, dealing with the issue of the digital divide in the students' community. Professor Nawangwe, it's your turn to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dranzoa, for that introduction, and the greetings from Makerere University. I must immediately warn you, moderator, that the power on campus here is not very stable. So there might be some disruptions, and you'll see how to manage if you see me going off. But I hope that that will not happen. Chair, I want to begin by saying that when COVID-19 was first announced in China, Mackay University actually sent a donation of face masks to China. And at that time, we were buying the face masks at 1,000 Uganda shillings. Now face masks cost between 5,000 and 7,000 Uganda shillings. So they have gone up in price by 7 times. We, of course, like many people, thought that China would manage to keep the pandemic within the borders of China. But you know, diseases have a way of escaping borders. And finally, the disease escaped. And when it was announced that we even had cases in Uganda, it came as some kind of a rude shock, but maybe as a wake-up call as well. Chair, I should say that we were closed on 20th March, following a presidential directive. All students were required to leave campus immediately, and they did leave. However, quite a few international students could not travel since the airports had been closed. And so the university is taking care of those in our residences on campus. Makerere University also gave some minimal support to the stranded students, especially with the provision of food. But it has come to our notice that even Ugandan local students also got stranded because the public transport was also halted after some time. So several students also got stranded here within Kampala. And also we had to find a way of assisting them with food through the National COVID-19 Task Force. Immediately after the COVID-19 was announced here, the government set up a task force, and quite a good number of the members of the task force are Makerere staff. So you can say that Makerere actually is directly contributing and advising the government on how to manage the pandemic. At Makerere, we also set up 2 committees. We set up what we call a COVID-19 response task force for Makerere University, and a task force on fast tracking online education. The 2 task forces were headed by the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic Affairs for the online learning, and by the Deputy Vice Chancellor Finance and Administration for the general response to COVID-19. Chair, I will try to share my screen where I had prepared some presentation. I don't know if it is visible. Chair, I hope that the presentation is visible. It is just 3 slides. So the first slide is about, is the heading for our presentation. Chair, now I can see that my slides have disappeared. So probably I will continue without them. So I would like to say, as I have already said, the Makerere University responded immediately to the crisis. One thing that happened was that the Ministry of Health requested us to allow the graduate students that work on hospitals to continue working, and we allowed that. And so our graduate students in the College of Health Sciences and the professors there continued working and are helping out on the wards. Several studies have been conducted, and they are still being conducted on COVID-19. We actually put out a call for studies on COVID-19, and they received more than 300 applications within 1 week. And about 200 of those have been allowed to continue, and work is going on. We, through our partnership with the Case Western Reserve University in the United States, we received a consignment of test kits, and these have been used by our researchers to do community testing in the western part of Uganda, and this is helping a lot to inform the management of COVID-19 in Uganda. We also embarked on innovations. Our researchers embarked on innovations, and I just want to highlight 3 of them. One is the EpiTent. The EpiTent is a specialized tent that was designed by our researchers during the Ebola outbreak in Western Africa. And it was a competition that was organized by the USAID, and Makerere won that competition. The tent is designed in such a way that, of course, it keeps out a lot of the environmental hazards. It keeps the tent cool, given our tropical climate, and it is very easy to clean. And so the tent is now being put to use for managing COVID-19 across the country. The second innovation is a low-cost ventilator, which was designed by our researchers in conjunction with the Kira Motors Corporation, which is our local car manufacturing company. The ventilator has undergone engineering tests successfully, and right now arrangements are being made to begin tests, clinical tests. And the third one was the rapid testing kit. Both the ventilator and testing kits are expensive on the world market, and actually they are not readily available. So one of our researchers embarked on developing the rapid testing kit, which is a kit that would reduce the time of testing from the usual 40 or so minutes to only 15 minutes. And the other advantage is that the tests can be done in situ immediately in any part of the country, including very remote areas. The cost of this kit will be only $1 as compared to the $65 of the kits that are available on the international market. So Makerere has responded in such a way to the problem here. Regarding our medium and long-term plans, of course, our students are all off campus, except the ones that I said we are keeping here. One of the important things that we looked at is how do we continue teaching and learning during or even after COVID-19, assuming that there will be prolonged partial lockdown. And so we had to refer to our policy and strategy on online distance and e-learning, which was approved by Council way back in 2015. We have some programs already running on this platform, and for example, in the School of Public Health, the Master of Public Health is completely online, and there are also courses that have been uploaded and being run online in almost all the colleges. But we do not have many complete programs running online. And that, of course, is a bit of a challenge. But I must say that COVID-19 has actually woken us up, and hence that committee by the DVCAA. So far, only 30 courses are uploaded on the Makerere University e-learning environment, and that is our platform for e-learning. 3 programs are fully online mode, and they continued. But also a lot of colleagues became innovative and they started running courses through Zoom, especially for graduate students. When we announced that we are considering moving to online, we received complaints from some students. They started sending, tweets and messages saying we are poor, we are rural, and how we shall be left behind. But I think this is not something that is feasible. We must move online. And what have we done to ensure that even those that think that they might have some challenges are not left behind? We have also, like the colleagues in South Africa, negotiated with our local telecom companies to zero rate all our websites which have student services. And so all the three major telecom providers here are zero rating our websites where we have the student material. I am happy to learn that the same is now being extended to all the universities through the Research and Education Network of Uganda. The providers have agreed now to provide to zero rate all the websites of the universities through that consortium. We embarked on training of staff to go on online delivery, and this is being done by our Institute of Online and Distance and E-Learning. We are also members of the International Institute of Online Education, which is actually providing quite a number of webinar courses to staff who are from the universities that are in that consortium. The Institute of Online and the Institute of Online Education is a UNESCO program based at the Southern University of Science and Technology in Shenzhen, China. They are doing quite a good job at providing information. The main thrust of that institute is to actually provide training to staff to be able to run online programs. And of course, we started all this not knowing that COVID was coming, but now we realize it is quite handy. Regarding the infrastructure, we are negotiating with manufacturers to enable our students and staff obtain equipment at affordable prices. And we put out a call, and we have so far received more than 1,500 applications by students and more than 300 applications by staff who are interested in obtaining laptops at an affordable price. We believe that we will be able to negotiate to ensure that our students can get laptops that cost between $200 and $250. Of course, there are options for the students and the staff who would like to have higher versions, more stronger versions, but those will cost a little bit more. But the important thing is that there is now that opportunity for students who probably would not be able to acquire these gadgets at the normal prices. The COVID-19 response team is working on modalities in case we are allowed to reopen. And here in Uganda, the government has indicated that we might be allowed to reopen only for the finalist years. But even finalist years alone for Mackay University is a large number. Every year we graduate more than 14,000 students. So even when we have those students, it is quite a challenge to make sure that they remain safe when they are on campus. So this team has worked out standard operating procedures and worked out a budget which will enable us observe those standard operating procedures. Obviously, we do not have that kind of money, and this proposal has been sent to government, which I believe is looking at it, and probably it will determine when we are allowed to reopen. So the lessons that we have learned, of course, is that we must learn to stand on our own in Africa. We must learn to stand on our own. When the crisis of ventilators hit the globe, there were no ventilators in the whole world. Those which were there were grabbed by the rich countries. The same thing with these test kits. Our ministry had to wait for 2 weeks to get test kits, even when they have paid for them. So these are very important lessons for us. How do we go along? How do we go ahead as universities to help our countries move along? And I want to agree with my colleague, the Vice Chancellor of the Free State, that yes, we must become more relevant to our countries. We are already trying to do that now. We have been doing that, but I think we have got the potential to be much more relevant, to help our countries solve the problems that, that face us. The issues, COVID-19, of course, is the immediate problem now, but we have issues of climate change, we have issues of unemployment, and so on. And I believe that we have built enough capacity to be able to contribute meaningfully to solving these problems for our countries. So that's what I will say at the moment, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nawangwe, for that insightful experience that Makerere has taken again lead on the African continent over this COVID. I think the inspirational talks from all the 4 presenters now gives us opportunity to realign our thinking on how to drive higher education institution on this continent. We are now moving to the 3rd part of this engagement, which is question and answer session. Because we have taken more time, I will request that questions that generated by individuals must be precise, and 1 question per person, and I'll take about 5 questions and then request our team to prepare to respond to those questions. Now, if any of you would like to ask a question, raise up your hand, or you send on the question and answer chat. We shall pick it up. If we don't see hands up, we shall move to the question and answer section. Yeah. I am informed Professor Lugujo, the Vice Chancellor of Deje University in Uganda, is ready and would like to make a short contribution of only 1 minute. Thank you. Professor Lugujo, are you on?
He needs to unmute his microphone.
Sure. Professor Lugujo, can you unmute and come on? While we are waiting for Professor Lugujo, I think we can draw a few questions from the online. And one question which I would like the panelists to take note of is from Elijah Firi. And he's asking if the panelists can comment on the opportunities the COVID brings to Africa on e-learning and the opening of campus walls or boundaries, and reassurance of quality learning through this new platform. I think any of our panelists can take that up. And also, Professor Lugujo, are you on?
Yes, I'm on, Chair.
Okay, okay, then come on, Professor Lugujo.
My question or comment was on private universities, especially in Uganda, when we are heavily indebted at this moment, right from March up to now, we haven't paid the staff, and we are thinking
Prof,
that,
just excuse me, can you turn your video on so we know whom we are speaking to? I know your voice, but most people don't.
yes. Okay. Okay.
Okay, if it's difficult, please carry on. We can hear your voice, please.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you, Prof. Go on.
The issue was on financial sustainability. And I was wondering if there is any collaboration or any comment on how best private universities can come up and see how to resume when we have a lockdown lifted. That was my comment on finance. But I've heard from the University of Morocco, the Polytechnic, that there is already online. This is not face-to-face. I would face-to-face, shifting to online. And I said if we could have some collaboration, because in in engineering, we have a problem with the practicals. Do we have a university within the region that has come up with innovation with the practical aspect, how to handle practical work during this pandemic?
Okay, excellent question. Any other question from North Africa or from West Africa? Okay, if I don't see a hand, I am going to request Professor Moll to give his thoughts because he doesn't have a lot of time with us. I'm going to ask him to give his perspectives, especially in the area of financing and collaboration as requested by Professor Lugujo. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I think Professor Moore probably already left the meeting.
Ah, okay. I had not noticed that. Sorry about that. Let's look through the question and answer session and see others can be answered later, but the critical areas that we think the panelists should address themselves related to what is currently pertaining. And one goes to Professor Nawangwe regarding students admitted to programs by research only. What proposals are we putting forward for such students? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe, can I make a comment on Professor Lugujo's questions?
Go ahead, please.
Yes, on financial sustainability, I would like to think that this is a national issue because in Uganda, more than 50% of the students at universities are at private universities. And therefore, this is an issue of national importance, and I would like to assume that the government is aware, and I have seen the chairperson of the Vice Chancellor's Forum addressing this matter, especially as far as taxes are concerned. But I think for private universities, the issue now is not just taxes alone, but if the students are not paying and the staff are not being paid, it is a problem. And probably the forum should address government on this matter and see how that can be solved so that we do not get a crisis in the private universities. Regarding the labs, Professor Lugujo, you are probably aware that when you were still here at Makerere in the Faculty of Technology, we have a program which is called iLabs. And through this arrangement, students could actually access labs from 12 other universities through the internet. Of course, that takes away the physical presence and the experience, but students could simply send data to a machine through the internet, and the machine sends back the results of their experiments. I think now, given the current conditions, this becomes much more pertinent. We were not using iLabs very seriously, very much, but now we can realize their importance. Now, coming back to the question that you asked, moderator, as long as the lockdown continues, although as we are all aware, most of the issues or most of the components of the lockdown have now been lifted, people can travel around, but there's still the issue of social distancing. So even if students, especially those that must go to the communities to do their research, even if they went to the community, given that this has been a little bit reduced, they might find a challenge of people actually agreeing to talk to them and agreeing to allow them to carry out the research. However, the research in labs could continue, and we have actually written to the government requesting that staff and students should be allowed to do research. The graduate students especially should be allowed back to continue with the research, of course, while observing the SOPs that the government has put in place. But it will still remain a challenge as long as we have a lockdown, particularly for the students who must carry out their research in the communities. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from Nigeria, and it is to Professor Paterson. And the question is on the situation where government gives and involves directly in the funding of universities. How will it be possible for university to manage the inadequate funding? That is for Professor Paterson. And there is another question. Which involves managing digital divide. And especially this goes to Professor William. How have you managed digital divide? Because this is where vicious cycle of poverty and lacking is really very, very vivid. So the audience would like to get some answers on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll respond to the two. The one on government funding is a little bit tricky because obviously government only have so much money in their fiscus, and they got a whole range of commitments and interventions or initiatives that they need to support. So I think firstly, we need to make sure that the relationship that the higher education sector in the specific countries have through their ministry is an open one, a confident one, to be able for the minister to make a specific case, a very confident case to the national treasury of those respective countries. So that I think is important thing, because if that isn't there, then you already would lose the political fight for money. But I do think that the focus that universities have to reassess in that is how to diversify their income streams. I referred to earlier about the financial model of universities, and therefore the engagement with private sector industry commerce is going to be quite crucial, together with philanthropic organizations and other organizations that make contributions. But there, the value proposition becomes key. And hence, I think it's important for each university to understand and to convey in a very clear and a manner to the stakeholders that this is our contribution to society in general. And hence, any contribution that you would make to our income stream will have these sort of impacts. The argument of only saying we're training students, and that's the reason why you're going to get your money is adding value, and those students would become graduate and employment, will provide employment later on to this economy of the country. That I think is an argument that is not going to last that long. You will have to come up with other value propositions. So I think it's that would be my response on the on government funding and the diversification of your income stream. With respect to digital inequality, now the way that I have crafted it is that we say that we would not like to leave any student behind, and therefore we will have a multiple approach in ensuring that students do complete or have all the means to be able to complete their academic year. So first of all, we have to make sure that if the students do not have devices, how can you get devices to the students? Secondly, if there aren't no connectivity, because that's the major challenge that we have across Africa, is that we're not evenly distributed in terms of connectivity. Then we need to say, well, how can we ensure that we got printed material that we get to the students? And that was a second intervention that we did. But as the lockdown levels specifically in South Africa is easing, and we have 5 lockdown levels, we're now at lockdown level 3, we have identified through our learning management system, which is a blackboard system, that indicate how many students actually is not participating in the learning management system, and therefore might not have connectivity, and that would be one of the reasons why they're not participating. And we define that group as a vulnerable group. And therefore, as the lockdown eases, we're going to invite those students, the vulnerable group, back to our campus, where there is much more evenly distributed connectivity. They can also engage with lecturers more effectively, but that will still have to honor the rules of social distancing, absolutely good sanitizing and hygiene, and then obviously the wearing and executing and the utilization of proper PPEs or personal protective equipment. So under those conditions, we will bring those students back to give them a chance to be able to get exposed to the digital devices in connectivity. But a last point, and that is the reason why I also talk about inequity, is the fact that besides the digital part, there's also the social circumstances. We often find that students live at homes in the rural communities, or where there are lots of people at home. The conditions therefore would probably not be that conducive for learning. And we need to understand who those students are and also bring them back as the lockdown eases. So that would be my response, Chair, in terms of the digital, how we have been managing the digital inequality.
Thank you very much, Professor Williams. May I request Mr. Labit to make some observations on the digital divide, considering that they are doing a lot of online stuff.
Merci, thank you for giving me the floor. Il y avait tout à l'heure une question sur les travaux pratiques. Effectivement, c'est là où nous avons rencontré le plus de défis, le plus de challenges. Et c'est là où nos professeurs, nos enseignants sont en train de voir comment apporter la solution. Nous avons un début de solution qui est basé sur tout ce qui est réalité virtuelle et réalité augmentée. L'UMCC accueille un centre qui s'appelle IDC for International Digital Center en partenariat avec des universités publiques et avec Aeon Reality. Et en fait, ils ont une plateforme de AVR et nous sommes en train de voir comment utiliser cette technologie pour monter des travaux pratiques nécessaires à notre cycle d'ingénieur, au cycle d'ingénierie et au master lié à tout ce qui est modélisation, y compris la chimie aussi. Nous sommes en train de regarder comment faire les travaux pratiques au niveau de la chimie et au niveau des sciences des matériaux. Donc, c'est un défi, mais je pense que nous avons les atouts pour pouvoir aller de l'avant et par conséquent impacter la façon avec laquelle nous faisons l'enseignement. Pour nous, on va pas revenir comme avant le Covid-19. Même à partir de l'année prochaine, même si les étudiants vont retourner sur le campus, nous devons respecter les mesures de distanciation et la capacité même des salles de cours va être divisée par 3 des fois. Et nous allons donc accélérer un modèle hybride entre le présentiel et le distanciel, même si les étudiants sont sur le campus, mais vont pas être tous au même moment dans une salle de cours. Donc, il y avait une question tout à l'heure sur quelles sont les leçons à tirer de cette situation. Pour moi, il y en a plusieurs. Si je devais en citer quelques-unes, la première serait que est de l'accélération de cette digitalisation au niveau de l'université, et je pense que c'est quelque chose qui a été observé partout. Donc les témoignages des autres panélistes l'ont confirmé. Ici au Maroc, la plupart des universités ont maintenant une proposition digitale et pas mal de projets qui étaient là, en fait, ont pu voir le jour dans une période très très courte, et ça c'est grâce vraiment à la situation actuelle. La deuxième chose, c'est que la contribution de l'université maintenant a plus de sens. C'est ce qui a été dit tout à l'heure. Nous devons, c'est notre mission, en plus de former l'élite de demain, former les décideurs politiques de demain, c'est d'avoir un impact sur la société, un impact positif, c'est d'accompagner les gouvernements, d'accompagner les ministères, d'accompagner les communautés. Et la situation du Covid a poussé des chercheurs, à pousser les différentes parties prenantes à essayer de voir comment contribuer d'une manière efficace, d'une manière efficiente et d'une manière très court terme. Donc, et ça, c'est quelque chose que je pense que ça va rester, le souci d'avoir un impact sur la société. La troisième leçon, et c'est un terme qui a été utilisé plusieurs fois, c'est le terme équité. Là, on s'est rendu compte que malgré tous les efforts que nous menons au niveau des universités pour donner sa chance à tout un chacun, quand la situation du Covid a vu le jour, nous nous sommes rendus compte qu'il y avait des étudiants qui n'avaient pas un ordinateur, qui n'avaient pas accès à Internet, et donc et là le mot qui fait sens, c'est vraiment le mot équité. Et là, c'est de notre responsabilité de nous assurer que tout le monde a les mêmes chances en fait d'accéder au contenu pédagogique et à l'enseignement. Comme ça a été rappelé par les autres panélistes, ici aussi au Maroc, nous avons réussi à mettre en place des plateformes et qui ne consomment pas en fait de forfait Internet pour les étudiants. Donc l'accès est gratuit. Nous avons négocié ça avec les 3 opérateurs téléphoniques et avec l'aide du ministère de l'Éducation nationale. Et pour moi, c'est une autre leçon, c'est que collectivement, nous pouvons faire avancer ce souci de donner accès et d'être équitable vis-à-vis de tous les étudiants. Voilà un peu mon feedback sur les différentes questions qui ont été posées.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Labat. We do have very many questions online, and I would request that our panelists look through and try to respond. I have seen a couple of them having been responded to. So continue responding online. We are now running towards end of our engagement here, but one major question that is, coming through and through is that universities are at different levels. Others have transitioned very fast since the pandemic. Others are still understanding how to move forward. And so from the experiences of the panelists, may I now request that you give a thought on what exactly triggered the first move, let's say for University of Freetown State and University of Makerere and Mohammed Polytechnic. I think each of you can give a comment on that, and this can also include your thoughts on this afternoon's webinar and also the engagement from your colleagues. I would give each person at least 2 minutes or so that we come to the conclusion of our engagement. Thank you. Professor Nawangwe, are you ready? How come you moved very fast with innovative projects? Did you have the money ready to call for applications? And I think this was very, very good. Let's hear from you.
Thank you, Chair. I can only say that I think Makerere was in many ways lucky because for the first time, the government gave us quite reasonable money for research. And so we had some money which was available to call for proposals. you can imagine that if we had to apply for support to international agencies, it would take not less than 6 months before maybe we got any money. We have actually, I can see a lot of my colleagues have applied for funds that have been announced by various agencies, and they have to go through the lengthy process. So that would not have enabled us to do what we have done. We have been able to do what we have done because the government gave us money. And this is extremely important for our governments to appreciate that they need to support our universities if we are going to meaningfully contribute to national development. They must fund research with local money so that we do not have to wait for money from international agencies, which in many cases comes with certain conditions that may not necessarily address the issues that we want to address. So yes, Chair, Makerere was lucky that we had this fund, which had just been given for the first time. And I think it has helped us to address the issues very, very fast. So all the studies, and including the innovations that I mentioned, have been funded initially using this fund from the government. The tent was already there, but it had to undergo modifications. The rapid testing kit could not start because the money was not readily available from government or from international donors. And so is the ventilator. All these have been funded initially by money that was provided by the government. The other stakeholders are somehow coming on now after seeing the work that has been done. They're getting interested, and they actually also now pledging support for the programs. But this would not have been possible if we did not have that fund in place. Moderator, I think that's all. Did you want me to say anything more?
What take-home message would you like to give to all our participants, especially leaders like you in the higher education sector? What take-home message do you have for our international students and for our local students? Thank you.
Well, for my colleagues, the university leaders, I think we all know that we cannot run our universities the same way we have run before. We have got to now seriously look at the priorities where we invest the little money that we have. And obviously, one priority that comes up is the digitization of all our processes, and as well as implementing e-learning. E-learning will be crucial even after COVID-19, especially for all of us African countries where our populations are just exploding. There is no way we are going to put all these people in classrooms physically who will be seeking a higher education. So online education is one answer to this, and therefore we must definitely invest in the area of online education and also digitization of all processes. To the students, I must say you are living in a generation that is privileged as compared to my generation. You have mobile phones, you have laptops, you have everything. And these are now quite affordable. There might be issues of connectivity, but as you have seen, I have been seeing the contributions from participants who are telling us how we can overcome the issue of connectivity. And the universities are putting in place all measures to ensure that that issue of connectivity is addressed. So students must adjust. There is no way about that. You just have to adjust and live in the modern times where you are actually living. You cannot be in modern times and want to continue doing things using Stone Age methods. For all the participants, I want to thank all of you for attending this webinar. Thank you very much for the contributions that you are making through the chat and through the question and answer. And these are all lessons for us. And for me particularly, I have seen a lot of things from which I'm going to learn to implement our programs even better. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you, Professor Nawangwe. May I request in the same way, invite Professor Paterson to give his last thoughts and also make that crucial comment. You moved very fast, you reconstituted, you realigned management and made different shifts, and it is what has borne a lot of dividends to this pandemic. How did you do it this fast?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Moderator. I think it's part of the role as leadership is to probably be one step ahead in a way. And so what the University of Free State did was to monitor what happened in China already end of December. And in February, I took a proposal
Professor Paterson, can you check your mic? I think you are muted.
No, I'm not muted. Can you hear me? Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear him. Maybe it may be a problem with your gadget.
Can you hear me? Can I continue, Madam Chair? You can hear me? Yeah, okay. So so what happened is that in February, I took a proposal to our Senate to form a COVID task team and to track exactly what happened in relation to the science, to make sure that the information that comes out from the relevant medical institutions are the correct information that we communicate, because obviously during these times a lot of fake news can confuse a lot of people. So we did that quite early on, and when we had the first case in February, in March, early March, in South Africa, we then formed the special executive group, and we effectively used the science to suspend our classes well before the lockdown. So what I'm trying to say is that we were prepared from a sense that we were monitoring the situation already in the other part of the globe, and we were be able then to use that information to come up with an adjusted budget that help us to release money to be able to fund COVID-19. I then also wrote a piece in the South African newspaper, but it also went global, asking the question, is remote teaching and learning an additional cost to universities, and should universities receive a stimulus package from government? And that paper we also feed into University South Africa, and that partially also contribute to the discussion from government to say, but let us see to what extent we can support universities, and there's where USAF, University of South Africa, came in. And at the moment, the South African government is also contributing and will be contributing to specific interventions to support our COVID expenditure across all our 26 universities. So it's probably the role that leadership should be playing, Madam Chair, not only in a crisis, but in anything, to be that step ahead, to be able to lead us through. So our funding comes through the government, or will come through government, and also our internal readjusting of our budget. But we could do that early on and communicate that very precisely to our staff in relation to what we're going to do. We also honor and try to honor our mandate of being a recipient or being a provider to society. So as a university, we say we need to play a role in our city, in our province, in South Africa, and obviously also in the rest of the continent. And to what extent can our scientists play that role? So as in the case of Makerere University, we have a whole suite of interventions, either on research or skill sites, that we assist government at a local, provincial, and national level to be able to fight this pandemic. My last thought, Madam Chair, to the participants, and I also would like to thank them for the Q&As and the chats. And it's actually, we don't have enough time to respond to that. But the way in which universities should be operating going forward will change. But it's not only the universities that will change, it's actually all the entities in the economy that's going to change. And therefore, we have to understand how they're going to change. And again, as leaders, you can't wait until they change and accept that change and then try to respond to it. You need to be with them. So for me, that co-creation with alumni, with philanthropy organization, with commerce industry, with government at different levels is so essential. And I would like, if that is a message that I want to bring across to our participants, to our leaders in the space, then that is what we should be focusing on, which ultimately mean that collaboration is going to be the buzzword and the thing for the future, but not collaboration for the sake of collaboration. Collaboration that is well crafted, well co-created, and can demonstrate that there's a benefit to society at large. And I would like us as higher education on Africa to start to have that conversation. And our internationalization strategy will also have to change in that regard. To our students, for me, Chair, there is a message that really comes out of the pandemic that we should try to take forward. And as leaders, we can't manage the crisis and not thinking ahead. We actually should already be ahead, and that the crisis should be managing by the specific structures that's been in place. But for the students, there is also the whole issue of agency. What this crisis have indicated, it's what is the role that I, as an individual, as a staff member, or as a student play to look after myself, but also to look at others, look after others, and to try to change them positively. If that can come through, because as the pandemic, we all have come together and we all want to respond to the pandemic. So social solidarity is there, but also agency. And if we can bring that discipline across, and I would like to urge our students to come in with that sort of attitude, and then we will have to work together to say, well, how can the digital part assist us, but also how we can act as human beings that is playing a role to change society, not only through technology, but also through the actions and the way that we do our learning and contribute back to our economy and society. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful. Our last panelist, Mr. Labit, your thoughts, your final thoughts. We do not have a lot of time, but just in 1 minute, your thoughts. Thank you.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Thank you. Donc, en fait, voilà, quelques idées, mais tout a été dit. Pour moi, en fait, il faut qu'on garde en tête les opportunités qui ont vu le jour grâce à cette situation. Le fait que l'enseignement demain va complètement être métamorphosé grâce à l'accélération qui a eu lieu pendant la situation du Covid en termes de digitalisation, en termes de nouvelle façon de faire de l'enseignement. Le fait d'avoir connecté l'université à son environnement, c'est quelque chose de très important. Il faut qu'on garde ça en tête. Nous sommes là pour avoir un impact. Il faut qu'on l'assume. Et l'impact passe, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, à travers la formation, mais à travers aussi la recherche et l'accompagnement de la communauté, l'accompagnement des stakeholders, des différents stakeholders. C'est quelque chose d'important qu'on a vécu, qu'on a testé pendant cette période, et c'est quelque chose qui doit rester. Revenons juste à la raison d'être d'une université et juste en fait le déployer mettons ça en place. La situation actuelle, excellente fenêtre de tir, excellente opportunité. Donc, gardons ça par rapport à la marche d'avant. Il ne faut pas qu'on oublie, il ne faut pas qu'on revienne sur nos pratiques antérieures à la situation du Covid. Si nous avons pu accélérer, c'est parce que on a vu les effets de cette situation et nous sommes allés chercher en nous-mêmes toute l'énergie nécessaire et en fait elle était là et je pense que cette énergie peut toujours rester si on arrive à expliciter le sens et la raison d'être des universités. Voilà. Merci beaucoup en fait d'avoir organisé ce webinaire pour ce partage.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Elabit. We've come to the end of our presentations and engagement. On behalf of RUForum and on behalf of all the partners of RUForum, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank the board of RUForum. I want to thank all of you participants for remaining attentive to these very important discussions. Most of what we have discussed will remain online and we should be able to revisit. We want to congratulate Professor Adipala and everybody for this first webinar in series. So here we have come to the end and I wish you all the best as we tackle this monster collaboratively. Thank you. Bye-bye. And I want to encourage more networks with all the partners and very active one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.